be happy that you got here and know that you make a difference is probably the best way of dealing with imposter syndrome, and then just managing the nerves.
To celebrate International Women's Day, we're taking the opportunity to chat to one of the most inspiring and influential women at Flight Centre Travel Group. Starting at the company on the eve of her 21st birthday, in the last 30 years she's had many careers here. She's become a wife, a mum, and a senior leader across many parts of the business. She says that being a woman has never held her back. In fact, she credits it as a key factor in her many successes over the years. She believes that women have an uncanny ability to combine both the hard and soft skills required to succeed in both business and in life. She's an incredible role model, particularly in a company where 70% of the workforce is female. Mel Waters Ryan, welcome.
Oh, thank you. That was quite lovely.
Thank you so much for being here with us today. Now, to kick off, we'd really love to know, why is International Women's Day important to you?
It's important to me on quite a few fronts. I grew up in a very female-dominated family. I'm one of two girls. My poor father had two sisters, two daughters, and three granddaughters, so no men in sight. And I don't know, I was always in a house where women were important and they were heard. And I then went to uni and got into business and Flight Centre, etc. And I'm not necessarily seeing the same everywhere else. And I think days like International Women's Day are really important to get the conversation going, to have have an agenda, if you like, about how we can actually get more women into not just the workforce, because they are, but right throughout all levels of the workforce. So it's a very important day for me to actually do. And in Women Wise in Flight Centre, we used to talk about the 3 C's, which was, to celebrate being women for a start, because it's an amazing privilege to be a woman, to connect with each other and particularly connect with other women that you don't necessarily know, to collaborate, to share some ideas, but more importantly to actually create change. So I think that's why I see this day as really important. Without a day to start the conversation, I don't think we would get the change that we need. But it's also a very special day for me personally, because my first daughter was born on International Women's Day. So Imogen, my older daughter, it's her birthday today. And so I don't know why, I always find it serendipitous that I had my first daughter on International Women's Day. So that makes it even more special to me.
Yeah, what a beautiful day to celebrate. Now tell us something about young pre-Flight Centre Melanie and where you thought you might end up.
Young pre-Flight Centre Melanie. Well, I was, of course, stolen as a child by Flight Centre, hence I've been here 35 years. No, I had quite a different background, an interesting background. I am the product of a nudist hippie family that came from London. We were 10-pound passage POMs to Australia in the late 60s, so there you go, you know my age. And I don't know how my parents became nudist hippies in London, but they did. So they emigrated to Australia. Wacol Immigration Centre, which is now Detention Centre, was my first home in Australia.
Yeah.
And then we ended up living in North Queensland, a little island called Magnetic Island off the coast of Townsville. And the young Melanie was basically a bit of a hippie herself. I don't remember wearing shoes for the first sort of 5 years of my life. And I remember having very little discipline. There were really no rules in my house. And the reason I say that is because I think that's influenced who I am today. I'm quite self-managed and quite propelled, if you like. And I think having a childhood where basically it was very laissez-faire allowed me to explore, allowed me to become very curious. So that's a little bit about me as a young person.
I love that. Now, Flight Centre Travel Group has a very distinct, inclusive and irreverent culture. How has that impacted your career, and what has being in this company meant for your career?
I kind of, and I used the word serendipity before, even the way I joined Flight Centre, I'd been travelling as a 21-year-old, had done the old gap year in the UK, and I came back and just needed some money, and I saw a job for Flight Centre, and I applied and got it. And I say serendipitous moment in my life because I found my natural home, I think. It's a culture that embraces irreverence, that embraces curiosity, that has a natural optimism, and I'm a natural optimistic person. So I think I found the place that I, could be successful, if you like. And it was just purely because I was looking for a job and answered that out in the paper that I arrived here. So it really, to me, and I say this to my girls and a lot of young people, make sure you work somewhere that you feel at home. it's really important you spend so much of your time there that you find a culture that brings out the best in you. And I think that's what the Flight Centre Travel Group culture has meant to me. Hopefully I've been impactful and involved in creating that culture, because when I started, of course, it was very small. But there's no doubt that it has allowed me to explore my natural curiosity, to do a lot of different jobs that I honestly don't know if I would have had the opportunity to elsewhere, and to make an impact. And, as I said, being optimistic is a real natural kind of core value of mine, and I think it is in the group. But the other one is to have an impact. I'm competitive, I need to make a difference, and Flight Centre is a place that I think really allows people to do that, and certainly has been impactful for my career, and has meant that I've been able to do lots of amazing things.
And what would you say has been your greatest achievement in your career?
Greatest achievement. Look, again, I'm so privileged that I've had so many achievements in this company that I feel really lucky, really lucky, really privileged. Perhaps the most recent one, and even though it was really emotional, was being part of the team, really being a core part of the team that got us through COVID. There's no doubt that, our backs were against the wall, and I've been through other, horrible situations with the group when the external world had a big impact on us. But COVID and helping us get through, I think, will be what I reflect upon as my greatest achievement. We managed to do in a few short months such amazing things, such awful, momentous things when I think about it. But yeah, the fact that we got through, that we survived, and we're coming out of COVID now a stronger company, I think I really feel proud of.
Yeah.
Really proud.
Yeah, and you're a monumental part of that, monumental. And I guess on that note, what would you like your legacy to be?
People have been asking me that as I've been on my journey to sort of retirement. And again, it's a difficult thing to think about, because again, I've been so privileged to be in so many, sort of major periods of the company's growth. I again feel, as I said, lucky. But if I had to come down to a couple of core things, I think legacy was not only being part of the development of our leisure model and its sort of growth to being such a major force in many countries throughout the world, but then being involved in transforming that leisure business particularly as we entered COVID and came out of it, so that we, I think, have a really strong leisure proposition now, and I really feel hopefully that's part of the legacy I leave behind. The other area is the area that I now am CEO of, supply. We have had amazing history of deep and mutually beneficial relationships with our supply chain. And I always like to think that Flight Centre is the business that all our suppliers and partners want to do business with, not that they have to do business with. And again, I feel part of hopefully a legacy I can leave behind is that really important factor that we are here to support our supply chain and get their products out there to all our customers to open up the world for those who want to see. And I feel really important about that as a real core capability to drive the group forward. So that's another legacy. And the other probable final one is maybe a bit of girl power, just by what we're doing today, by starting Women Wise, which I started some years back with Carol Cooper at the time, by doing whatever I can to empower women throughout the organisation. I'd like to think there was a bit of girl power that was the Melanie Waters Ryan legacy, if I'm honest.
Absolutely, for sure. So, Mel, what has been your biggest failure, and what has it taught you?
There's been lots of business failures, but if I'm honest, the failures that probably have impacted me the most, and there's one in particular I remember, and I've made this mistake a couple of times, is I've been made to actually sack someone. And I'm going to be really brutal about the words. It was in my earlier leadership years, and I remember we often sometimes try and blame someone for a situation. That's not a Flight Centre way, I think it's just humanity. And I remember once, years and years ago, going to basically ask someone to leave because something hadn't worked, knowing that it really wasn't their fault, but they'd just been made the scapegoat, for want of a better word. And at the time, the particular young lady responded really badly and ended. Anyway, in the end, I just remember thinking, this is wrong. I did it, but I actually did maintain contact with her, and I helped to get another job outside the organisation, which I feel was the right thing to do. But what I'm trying to say here is the failures have been when I haven't listened to my own intuition and my own gut, and I did something that someone else thought was right, but I knew was wrong. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to say that I think as leaders, and particularly women, listen to your own thinking, listen to your own, gut intuition sometimes, and don't do something that you inherently know to be wrong. And actually one of our board members, John Eales, does a thing about the haka, and I don't know if you know the story about when he was Australian captain and they turned their back on the Kiwis when they were doing the haka. And I remember his speech really resonated with me because he said he knew it to be wrong and he did it, and he's been on a journey of reconciliation since. And I think that's what the failures have been when I've failed people. And I've done it once or twice when I knew it was the wrong thing. And my hindsight there is to make sure as a leader that I do what I believe to be right, not what I'm told to do sometimes.
Has gender influenced your career? And do you feel that you or women have had to make more sacrifices in their career?
Absolutely, gender has influenced my career. Let me deal with it maybe in two parts. As a leader, I have been called, labelled, whatever you want to call it, a little emotional at times over the years. I think someone may have used the word turbulent once to describe me. And I know what they were trying to say. I do let my emotions show. And sometimes maybe a little bit too much. But you know what? I'm okay with that because as a woman, I am a little emotional, and I think that's made me, if I'm honest, a better leader. I think my level of I can read a room, I can tell if people are upset. I'll try and encourage them to openly, talk about what they're thinking about. So my gender has influenced me because I think it's brought different skills and thinking to maybe a room. And one of the things I haven't enjoyed necessarily is being the only woman in a room, because sometimes I feel then you suppress some of that natural gender style because you try and fit in. And it's actually better when there's a couple of women in the room because I think you can encourage that difference of opinion or thought. So it's definitely influenced me. It's something that I had to grapple with, and I actually say it to a lot of women: never try and be a man, or never try and be someone you're not. Try and be the person you are. And I am a little bit emotional, so I'm going to go with that as being a positive, because then what it's also meant is, as I said, people have called me genuine. They know, and I recently just had an experience with a leadership group where they asked me to be in the room, and it was a difficult conversation, and they said, "We know you'll be direct and honest, and you'll understand and empathise." So that's what I'm saying is the genders, I think, has given me a different perspective. I do have to manage it, but I think it brings a different thinking to the room.
Yeah. Is that a lot of pressure as a woman, though, to be relied on to have to bring those skills into that kind of situation?
Yeah, it can be pressured, but maybe it's a space that, take. I always say to people, leadership is being given a space, but also wading in sometimes. So as a woman, and it's not just a female, let's call it a more soft skills, that you bring. If they're your strength, bring them to the room. And, try not to suppress them, but also try and make them a positive. I mean, it's not, good having a massive, SPAC attack and yelling and screaming at people. It's got to be because you're empathising, because you can see people are hurting and you want them to talk about things, or you can see they're just dealing with the emotional side of what is a logical journey, and you need that logic and emotional sort of intuitive balance, I think. Then you asked about sacrifices, and this is has played a lot on my, because yes, I have made sacrifices. I haven't, as a mum, I haven't been at everything maybe I could have or should have been at. To be honest, and I say this to all, particularly mothers, you will just have guilt as a working woman. You just have to accept that. It's never going to go away. And I can even read a funny story you asked me about before. I'm about to do, a bit of market stuff where we go and talk to the market. I still remember a couple of years ago doing a roadshow where we have all the investors dial in, and anyway, we were doing the hour call with them, whatever, Screw, Adam, various of the other C-suite. And my phone kept going, and I could see it was on silent, but it was from my daughter, and she was in grade 12 at the time. And I remember after I've seen about 33 messages, I'm thinking, oh my God, there's an emergency. She's about to die. And I had to excuse myself from a very important call, leave the room. And when I rang, I never cook, but I'd actually done some chicken in sort of a bit of a marinade, and I'd accidentally put the raw chicken in my daughter's lunch versus her chicken sandwiches. And she was ringing me going, "What will I have for lunch?" And I went, "I can't believe this. What man would ever deal with that?" I mean, my colleagues didn't have the same sorts of calls, but it's just, you do you have to leave to do the medical emergencies. You have to do these things. So yes, you make sacrifices, but I still feel the life I had, I would recommend, or would recommend to anyone. It's definitely worth it. You just have to juggle.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And stay away from the raw chicken.
Yes.
Or
cooking, which I now do completely.
And what does gender equality mean for all genders, and what could we be doing better?
Gender equality to me is an important for all genders, not just women, because what I think it does, and by the way, this relates to all forms of diversity, I think it broadens thinking. And I'm a naturally curious person. In fact, actually, I'll share something with you. I collect favourite words, and have you heard I've used the word serendipity a few times? I love serendipity as a word. There's just something about lucky happenings that, that's what, serendipity is about. The other one is curiosity. I love curiosity. I think it's something we should encourage in our children, something we should encourage in our workplace, is this desire to find out more, to know more, to be curious about what people are thinking and feeling. And I think diversity makes that happen more so, because you just bring more perspectives to the table. So the breadth of thought, I think, is really important, particularly in today's complex world. So to me, it's an agenda that will actually improve companies. And you've seen a lot of data when there's more women involved at leadership. Generally there are better outcomes for a company. I actually think if there were more women in charge globally, we would not have the same sort of levels of problems we have. I'm not saying we wouldn't have them, but I just think we would have a better world if more women, because we just get in front of each other and talk to each other, and I think that's what we bring. We bring that ability to let's have a chat. Let's have a chat, let's work through this and see what we can come up with. So to me, it's a really important agenda and a platform. Hence, by the way, International Women's Day is so important.
Yeah. Okay, how would you describe your leadership style? And how has it evolved?
It's evolved a lot. God, it would have to have. My leadership style, I would say firm and fair. Remember I said I grew up in a household with no rules, but somehow I've ended up being relatively firm. And it's not that I like to set rules, I just like things to be clear. So I think being clear is kind, being firm. I think people want a disciplined leader who they know what to expect. So to me, being firm is really an important part of leadership, but it's also important to be kind, to, as I said, empathise, to understand different people's positions. And I think that would be sort of my summation: firm and fair, but also open. Open to ideas, and not just in ideas from, I like to read, ideas from, academic theory, if you like, but ideas from other companies, not just from, our own company. So as I said, I think I have a firm, fair and curious style of leadership. But I'm decisive as well. I don't think that's something to apologise for, is to be directive and decisive. And in fact, as we're here on International Women's Day, why do women who are directive and decisive get called bossy, but blokes don't? So I'm going to embrace bossy because I think it's a good quality. So yeah, I'm bossy as well. And I'm okay with that. In fact, I often find if you want to get a job done, I say to a lot of people, bring me the list of all the bossy organised women and we'll get the job done.
Absolutely. And who has mentored you or influenced you?
I have never had an official mentor, that kind of I'm your mentee, you're my mentor, which I think is, again, a good point to talk about. Is mentoring comes unexpectedly, and you don't necessarily have to have that formal relationship. I mean, I started as a 21-year-old in this company working. Screw interviewed me. Screw's absolutely been a mentor, but never in that official capacity. I've certainly observed, I've watched, I've been involved with a lot of what he's done. A couple of the things he's certainly mentored me on is that reading pursuit and that desire to find out and be curious about what's going on in the world. Lots of the women in my early part of my career were definitely mentors. Again, accidental mentors. Margaret Mulholland is a legend in this company, Sue Rennick, all of those amazing women that I had the fortune to work with in the early parts of my career, and again, right throughout my career, I think were strong mentors. But mentors outside as well. My sister, I am, as I said, one of two girls, and my sister is the best person I know, and again has probably helped me in some of those areas. She's much nicer than me. So that listening, that desire to connect with people. I think she's certainly helped me, and my own daughters, one of whom works for Flight Centre now. I'm very, very privileged. They've certainly mentored me by helping me think from a more younger generation capacity, and of course they'll tell me anything. They're not necessarily scared to pull me up either. So mentoring, there hasn't been anyone official, but there's been so many people who have influenced me, and that's actually one thing I think as I've got older and more mature, not as mature as I could or should be in some instances, but is that ability to look more broadly, not necessarily at people above you, not necessarily just people around you as your peers, but the people who work for you. There's so many great ways you can be influenced.
I especially love that message that you don't always have to lean on the ones who are older or more experienced or more senior than you. What can you take from the people who are around you?
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. I think it's what am I trying to say? Don't contrive that relationship. Just look for it. And when you look for it, I think there's so many learnings and people who can impact you. But you do need to take the time. I think that's one thing. It's all very well to have a mentor or people who influence you, but more importantly, take the time to think. Actually, that's again something I've learnt to balance. I do a lot of talking. I need to balance thinking, and you need to build thinking time in so that the impact of those mentors, those influences, you can actually think about how they, what you can take on board yourself. You do need to really build in thinking into your calendar.
Yeah. Now, this is a big one for me, especially. How do you navigate imposter syndrome or just plain old nerves when you're leading?
Imposter syndrome. I've heard it so many times, and I'm not sure if I've had what I call imposter syndrome, and maybe it's my confidence. I've never felt I shouldn't be here or shouldn't be doing something. But geez, I've certainly felt anxious, nervous, conscious of, am I having the right impact? So it's not about not the right to be there. It was the right to have the right level of impact. How do you deal with that? It's and I think, by the way, this is where women are much harder upon themselves. Be organised. You're always better when you're organised. Organised about what you want to think about, what you want to say. Use your own habits and rituals as that form of comfort. Again, I'll share something with you. I do a lot of public speaking, but don't think it hasn't been something I've worked on. I often will get into a room and suss the stage out to feel comfortable in the physical space so that then I'm not worried about that. I can pay attention to what I'm saying and not, that nervousness about when you're suddenly, in front of a group. Most women I know who've got to positions of leadership so deserve it. They shouldn't, be concerned. But the fact that they're going to feel a bit anxious or nervy about it is fine. Just work through that. Be happy that you got here and know that you make a difference is probably the best way of dealing with imposter syndrome, and then just managing the nerves.
That's great advice. I'll be writing that down for later for sure. Now, what advice do you have for our next generation of leaders, especially women?
Collect skills and experiences. If I could sum it up, I think younger generation will move around more. It's in their, in your psyche nowadays to do that. I feel fortunate that I happen to join a company where the number of different jobs I've had has been amazing. So I have collected skills and experience within the one company. So my advice to any up-and-coming leaders, but particularly women, because women are less likely to move around and collect skills and experiences. They tend to stay longer in the one area, which means they get to really great levels of proficiency and expertise, but you need to move around. And particularly for women, one of my key pieces of advice, and it's not mine, it actually came from Gail Kelly, who is head of Westpac Bank, is to understand how the cash register rings in a business. And actually, even in personal life, if you understand money and how money flows and where it comes from and what to do with it, it's so empowering. And I think that's an area where women in particular undersell themselves. So make sure you understand, your own personal finances, your family's finances, be an active part of it. The same thing at work. Make sure you understand how the cash register rings. Why do customers give us money, and then what happens to that money? But then, as I said, my other key piece of advice is collect skills and experiences. Throw yourself at a new job, even if you've only got sort of half the qualifications that they're necessarily looking for. because you will learn. And I think that broadening of your experience and skill set means that you are a better leader, a better thinker, and are more considered, you know, when promotions, etc., come up. But the other thing is to have some fun.
Yeah.
You know, leadership is taxing and hard, but it's enjoyable and fun. And you know, if you're not having fun, then you shouldn't be doing it. So, I again, after 35 years in this company, I feel, as I said, privileged, lucky, fortunate, I don't care what word we use, you know, that serendipitous moment where I answered that job application has given me a career that I can only feel so, you know, proud of. And, you know, those pieces of advice, as I said, I've just come through and learnt along the way. I'm hoping that maybe I can help someone else, you know, maybe have a similar career path.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned before that your daughter works in Flight Centre. What would you say to her on that same sort of vein?
Stick with it. I will actually tell her this, my one, not regret, but one thing I would have liked to do is work overseas with Flight Centre. I would encourage her to do that, you know, to go to other countries, to have her world opened up as mine was by trying new things and new places. And to stick with her convictions. Remember I said that lesson I learnt earlier about if you think it's not right, then speak up. But I feel she has a really hopeful, great career ahead of her, just like you guys, just like any of the women in this company if they choose to. So yeah, I feel it's kind of almost, again, this beautiful moment that as I leave, my daughter's career is starting.
What about if you want to get to the top? What do we need to do as women for ourselves and for each other to get more women at that level of leadership?
That is the one thing that I really am still grappling and don't have the answer to specifically. I could be contentious. I think we should have quotas. You know, I'd like to think women get to the positions at the very top because they've earned it, and they do, but there's not enough coming through. And I think quotas are the way to help. And they can be quotas just around initially number of applicants. So for any of the top jobs, making sure there's at least equal female, male, you know, in the applications. The people who are assessing, you know, who are doing the interviewing per se, again, you know, let's have equal numbers there. So the quotas can be coming through, and then I think eventually we probably need quotas in terms of percentages, which we do have to as a board at a board level. Why not in our very most senior level as well? What else could we do? Spot the talent early and bring them through. And it's shepherding or sponsoring, not just mentoring. And I certainly try and do that, you know, in the last couple of years. You know, who do I see as the next couple of key female, you know, top leaders, and how do we shepherd them and sponsor them right to the top? I think we could do a bit more there, to be honest, to make sure they're getting through into all levels at the group and in life in general, but just not quite at the top, and we need to do a bit more, I think, in that space.
That's all we have today for questions, so I just wanted to say a really big thank you. It's been a privilege and a highlight for me to even be able to sit down and chat to you, so I appreciate your time, but thank you as well for being such an inspiring and influential leader within Flight Centre Travel Group. I know that there are so many people who look up to you and think that you are one of the greatest female leaders we've ever had, so thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Sarah. I as I said, just to finish off, it's going to be a very emotional few months for me as I head towards retirement. I know that it's the right thing for me in terms of my life and where I'm at, and I feel, you know, that the company's on a great path, and I can leave knowing that, you know, I hopefully helped put it onto that path, but it is the right time for, you know, the new generation to come through. But I just wanted to say to everyone, thank you so much for the support that you've given me as well, and I'll be in the background cheering every day for Flight Centre Travel Group. Thanks very much.